My name is Cédric Maloux. Some of you know me as the CEO of StartupYard, but I'm the accelerator, Startup Accelerator, but I'm also the president of French Tech Prague. And for those of you who don't know what French Tech is, it's a government-sanctioned organization. We report to the Ministry of Economy and Finance in Paris. It's a global network of the French tech community. We are present in 65 cities around the world, including Prague, and we are all volunteers. There are 1,500 volunteers around the world working for French tech. Our goal is to create a sense of community locally in our own cities. So we organize a few events like this one, and we help and participate to those events. But the reason why I'm here today is because French tech globally has 3 themes. The first one is tech sovereignty. It's important to be sovereign when it comes to tech infrastructure. The second one is ecological transition. And the last one is gender equality. And this is one of the themes of the French tech, and this is one of the reasons why I'm here with you today to moderate this panel. We talked a little bit about role models earlier, and I'm actually very excited and very happy because I have with me 5 role models, and I hope they will be role models for people in the room. So let me introduce and welcome them on stage one by one. I will start from the right. Magdaléna Radová from Tilia Impact Venture. Markéta Přenosilová from, I know it's such an exercise for me, from the Europe Startup Nation Alliance and Czech Invest. Jana Pattynová, from a partner from Pierstone. Pierstone is a law firm specialized in tech. Klara Losert, who is the CEO and co-founder of Talkbase. And last, I kept the most difficult word for the end, name for the end. Daria Hvížďalová from 42 School. I still need to, it's the second time I introduced you in the last year and I still fail miserably.
Practice makes perfect.
Practice makes perfect, absolutely. Thank you very much for the encouragement. Our panel is called How Can the Business Ecosystem Contribute to Changing the Status Quo? And as I was listening to the previous panel, I came into this panel thinking businesses are acting badly. They're bad. They're not hiring more women. We need to change this. This is bad. But what I realized during the previous panel is maybe one of the reasons there aren't so many women who are being hired in tech is because the education system is not producing so many women in tech. So this is something we're going to, cover a little bit. But there are also some issues about attracting women to businesses, retaining women in businesses, and maybe also motivating and being a role model, and to the younger generation who are still studying or might want to become, one of these ladies. I'm also a person who loves data. I'm an IT engineer, so I just wanted to share some data with you of the state of affairs. In the startup world, which is my world, you know that there's a VC world, the venture capitalist. In Europe, only 15% of the VCs are women. So even on the investment side, there's not so many women. And I was talking earlier with, where are you? Of you here, sorry, with Magdaléna, about this is not getting better, but maybe we'll get back to this. You've heard of Web 3, the crypto web. We had Web 2, Web 3, which is the next generation of the web, according to some. Only 13% of Web 3 founding teams are women. So again, this new generation of the web technology is not different. At StartupYard, my job is to look at startup, at teams, and maybe make some investment. I just looked, before I came here, over the past 6 months, I reviewed 225 startups. And out of the 225 startups, there were only 10 of them which were led by a woman. So even in the startup world, we have the startup CEO. Sorry, if you're here. God, it's going to be difficult to point at the right person. Sorry. I was also looking at neobanks. You know, you look at the fintech world, neobanks are the next generation of the banks. 72% of the top management positions are held by men in neobanks. At those same neobanks, women only hold 26% of board position, which is 10% less than in a normal bank. So these are tech banks. So we all know that Europe has a talent shortage. It's the case in Czech Republic, it's the case in France, it's the case in Europe. How could women grab this opportunity is one of the questions that I ask myself. And is it the fault of the businesses or is it the fault of the education? So let's jump directly in the topic, and I'm going to stop talking because this is not about me, this is about you. And I'm going to ask the first question. I will go in this order, so starting with Magdaléna. Could you please tell us about your background? Yes, you need this. And how did you become interested in the issue of underrepresentation of women in tech, please?
So, hello everyone, pleasure to be here. I'm Magdaléna. I work for Tilia Impact Ventures, which is investment fund investing in startups. So I'm from the same world as Cédric, and we focus only on startups that do some good for the society, that they contribute to solving some environmental or social challenges of our times. We focus on very early stage startups. And prior to this work, I used to live in Luxembourg and work with network of female business angels and female investors, and work with the local Ministry of Economy on studies, you know, how to support and empower more female founders. And now I moved back to Prague, and I can see similar trends picking up here in Czechia. And me as a sustainable and impact specialist, gender diversity and increasing gender diversity is always on top of my head, not only because I'm woman, not only because I care, but also because it's a great business opportunity. And I think Barbara already mentioned that in the previous panel, you know, that teams that are mixed or have enough female in the leadership position perform better than just purely male teams, and it's you know, up to 50% better in terms of financial returns and the share performance. So that's already saying something, and there are more and more research confirming that. So I'll stop here and pass the microphone.
Thank you. Markéta?
Thank you, Cédric. So my name is Markéta, as it was mentioned, and it's glad to see you here this afternoon. My whole career, it's connected to startups and supporting them actually within the government. I work for the Czech Invest, which is the governmental agency dedicated not only for attracting foreign investments here in the Czech Republic, but also the startups. And we started the first acceleration program, which was focused on sending Czech companies to the Silicon Valley so they can learn from the best. And it was back in 2011, which I think it's probably almost the same year as the StartupYard was established, right? So it was like a boom here in the Czech Republic. And since last year, I am a chairwoman of the Presidency Board of ESNA, which is the European Startup Nation Alliance. It's a new agency on a European level, which should help member states and the governments to achieve the European Startup Nation standards. And one of the topic, it's also the equality, not only the gender one, but also other like the ethnics and underrepresented people from unprivileged backgrounds to do more in a business. And yeah, that's probably all at the beginning from me.
Thank you. Jana?
Thank you, and it is a privilege to be part of this distinguished forum. I'm a tech lawyer, so many people would consider that I am not a tech woman because I am a lawyer. So I have kind of 4 angles from which I look at women in tech. First, as a lawyer, I had to choose the industry in which I will practice many years ago. And I chose tech because I thought that it has the greatest potential for gender equality compared to traditional sectors as real estate or finance. And I still believe that, it can deliver on this promise because it's all about curiosity, flexibility, innovation. So everything that is basically aligned with the trend of gender equality. And as a mother of 4 children, it was very important to make the right choice for me. And that's why also I became involved in many initiatives that help and support this trend. Second, I manage one of the very few top-ranked law firms in Europe that have equal participation of men and women in the partnership structure. And that basically made that I had to spend a lot of hours thinking about plausible career paths for me and my female colleagues, and how you can combine a career in very competitive industry with family and other life choices that you wish to make as a woman. Third, I'm involved in an NGO organization that is called Forum 50%. It is an organization that supports participation of women in politics. And I believe that, if every society or organization can be easiest changed from the top. And I believe that if we will have more and more representation of women in the political landscape, changes in other sectors will be easier too. And lastly, within my job as a tech lawyer, I spent recently a lot of time on the ethical and regulatory challenges that are brought with the technological development and the impact that the new technologies have on society, human rights, democracy, the very tissue of our societies and values, how we perceive them today. And I'm truly convinced that if we want to fully appreciate this impact and address it adequately, we need at the very least equal participation on men and women in the tech sector, particularly in the engineering force and in the leadership of the tech sector.
Thank you, Jana. Klara?
Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Klara. I'm one of the co-founders at Talkbase. We are an early-stage startup based out of Prague, so out of here. Like I said, we're a small team. We closed a pre-seed round in the summer, which was a little over 2 million, which made me the 10th woman, I believe, in the Czech market to ever raise VC capital, which I think is absolutely horrendous. And I'm really excited that we have this conversation, that the interest is there from all sides, from the legal aspect, from the government aspect, and from the investor aspect as well, to support more female founders. Apart from building Talkbase, I am also an angel investor, and I focus on investing in female founders. So that's me, and I'm excited for this conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Clara. Daria?
Thank you, and pleasure to be in such company. My name is Daria. I'm Russian. I was born and raised there, did my bachelor's there, and after that I moved to do my studies in Stockholm. And that was the first moment when I realized that the educational system does not have to be difficult, that there is a way to do it in a more inclusive path. And after that, I moved to Czech Republic, now almost 10 years ago. And I think similar to some of the speakers of the previous panel, I didn't really realize that being a female can be some sort of a unfortunate setup or a misadvantage when you are pursuing a career in tech. Also, being an immigrant in Czech Republic, honestly, I think it's like the first level of shortcomings that you need to overcome and prove yourselves to others. And after that, being a woman is sort of a secondary level that you can already deal with. But in Czech Republic, I worked in a privately funded AI research lab. Then I moved on to the manufacturing sector, being responsible for creating AI-driven software products in the industry. And there was 0 women. That was very upsetting. So I started looking out for the ways of how can we actually change that. And also after having my daughter, the topic of education and the systematic change is something that resonated with me a lot. So then there was an opportunity to host or to establish a school 42 Prague here in Czech Republic, which I founded a bit over a year ago. And that's a nonprofit which is focused on comprehensive and free retraining, professional retraining and upskilling for people coming from all backgrounds into software engineers. And that seemed like an excellent opportunity to encourage career change in women at different ages and at different stages of life. So that makes sense to me.
And what was the percentage of women in the last batch?
So we started our first batch of 129 students this winter, and it's 30%.
30%.
So I dare say we're doing well and have some speculations as to why is that, but I'll hold that for later.
Sure. So we want to talk about the business, but I want to just come back to what Jana was saying about the politics and importance to have politician and woman politician, because something happened last week, and Markéta knows what I'm talking about. Something happened in Hungary, and I just want to, for like 2 seconds, 2 minutes, explain to the people what happened, because it concerns what you're doing. So if you could explain what happened, yeah? And we're pointing fingers tonight. Yeah.
Actually, I wish I could explain, but I can just comment what happened. The member states, they actually have to decide to join, that they would like to improve the startup environment across the Europe and within the specific country. And almost every European country decided to sign the standards that they would like to help the environment, except the Hungary, and their official statement was that they don't want to support those standards, because one of the standards is that there should be like a gender equality, both like men and women, and also other people, specifically like the LGBT community, and that's why they decided not to sign the declaration, because they don't want to support this initiative. So I do have friends within the startup community in Hungary. They are obviously a little bit upset. And they have to deal with it, and I wish there could be like anything what can be done, but I do believe that when we improve the environment also in other countries, it can actually help the Hungarian startup funders to have the better conditions to grow their startup.
But I suppose it also shows how fragile this topic can be based on politics. So anyway, let's not talk about politics today, but I wanted to mention this because I think it's horrendous. Let's come back to Czechia. We heard this. We heard the statistic earlier. The Czech Republic is at the bottom in Europe in terms of the number of women representing in tech. So my question is very simple. Why is this happening? Why do you think Czechia is at the bottom? Magdaléna?
Yes, so I think there are several factors, and I think we will describe them all. But from me, one of the top ones is the social stereotypes in the Czech Republic, and the roles of men and women that are still old-fashioned. And I can say that from my personal experience, having lived abroad in the Western countries and then coming back to the Czech Republic, to the VC world, where less than 10% are women in all those big gatherings. And the social stereotypes really are present, and I can feel them. So that's one of the top ones for them. Then I definitely think that there are shortcomings in the hiring practices in bigger companies. That's not really my sector, so I let some of the other women speak. And the other one would be still lack of support and role models in our geographies for women. So yeah, those are the top 3 points from my side.
If I may add probably something, I think that there is a saying from the Maria Wright Endelman, it's a children's rights activist, and she said, "You can't be what you can't see." And I think it's connected to the topic. If you can't see so many female entrepreneurs in the startup world, if you can't see so many scientists within the science, then you can imagine that you can do it. So this is the one thing, like the role models, as you mentioned, it's one important thing. And the second, when you usually ask the children if they can draw the scientist, they usually draw the man with the white coat lab, right? So this is what you usually see in a television or in some stories, or maybe in a real world. So the perception, it will be probably the one thing. And second, it actually might be, when we talk to the business, there is in Europe about 22% of women who are working in a tech world. When we look at it closer, it's almost the parity when we look at the tech companies that they are working there, but mainly as assistants or within the marketing or roles like that, but not within the tech roles. What can be changed? It's probably no, or there are no silver bullets like to hit it, but to have more role models, or maybe when the companies can look within themselves if there is this issue and how can be addressed. There is a lot of initiatives here in the Czech Republic, but also abroad to gather and ask them for a review or for the help. And also another thing, it was mentioned here that within the investment roles within the funds, there is about 15% that the women are represented. I think that within within the Western countries in the European Union, it's more. But what's interesting is that in a CEE region, and especially with the Romania and Hungary, the percentage is higher than here in the Czech Republic or in Slovakia. And when the startup funders are asking for the money from the investors, the less women you have within those venture funds, the less women can get the investment, and this is the proof according to different studies like the McKinsey on from the EBAN as well.
Jana?
Maybe on the very practical level, I see also a correlation between women in tech and in any industry in general, and the number of part-time employments compared to full-time employments. And the Czech Republic is also not scoring in that very well. I think we have 28% of part-time employments compared to Western European countries that are above 40. And at the same time, about 81% of those part-time employments are women. So that is linked to enabling an equal career path while caring of a family or basically pursuing other preferences that you may have in life. So I think that's something that can be changed on a very practical level. And in addition, there is not just enabling part-time, but enabling also a full career growth while being on part-time. Because in fully competitive industries like engineering, like consulting, like venture capital, the conventional wisdom is that your career path is kind of directly linked to the number of hours you devote to your profession. So it requires a lot of creative thinking, how you actually break this equation, and you bring other elements to that. And what we have seen in practice is that women often have managerial skills that are underrated. We have also seen, because as lawyers we basically record every 5 minutes of our time that we spend, that the perception, that women work part-time is very often just a perception, and that, half-time is not always a half-time. And there is also more willingness to transfer know-how and to train others. And if you fully remunerate that, and if you reward that in career paths, there is also something that is promoting and enabling like a fully equal career path while not being able to devote possibly the same number of hours as your male colleagues in certain stages of life.
Klara.
Thank you. Why don't we have women in tech? I think there's like so many
So many reasons.
I spent 10 years now working in tech, so I'll kind of talk from more of like the personal experience, because I love that we heard kind of all the data and all the different angles. Working in tech is extremely fun and extremely rewarding if that's something that you want to do. But if you don't have allyship within the company, not just representation, I 100% agree that representation is important, but you also need allies. It's extremely hard for you because, as was mentioned, there is a lot of stereotype. There is a lot of bad behaviors. And the 3 companies that I worked for, I was the only woman in the team. There are many reasons why I loved that job, and there were many reasons why I hated that job. Every single company and every single team, actually, everybody thought that I only got the job because I was previously friends or even further with the boss that hired me. In every single team, no matter how hard I worked, no matter if I put twice the hours, no matter if I did all the extra work, right? So I think allyship is absolutely important, and the way I think we can start here is by looking at our own bias, right? What Markéta mentioned, when you tell kids to draw a scientist, right? When we tell ourselves, like, imagine a manager, what do they look like, right? Imagine an engineer, what do they look like? If you feel and see your own bias and learn to speak about it and learn to fight it, that's how you can really help, and that's how you can get more women into tech, because not that it's hard, because the education system has very same, I would say, atmosphere right now as the tech industry does, as well as, women don't have the same starting line to start with. And if you're interviewing for a tech job and you didn't have as many opportunities before, you're, of course, it's really hard for you to be as qualified as the other candidates. Same for VC funding. If you, for centuries, had worse job opportunities, it's harder for you to be better at a job than a man, right? So I think it goes way back, not just last couple of years, but many, many years. And what we need is not just representation, it's allyship, and starting at individual level, not just corporations, not just institutions, but all of us kind of thinking, how can we help the next friend of ours, the next colleague, the next person that's underrepresented, climb up the ladder and help them get there. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this funnel of creating a more diverse tech landscape has 2 bottlenecks, and one is acquisition, another one is retention. The acquisition one was covered beautifully and summed up in the first panel, because you basically need a bigger data set to choose from. You need to educate more girls and bring them into the fields so that there is a bigger pool of those who can shine later on. But then on a later stage, and that was touched upon before, I believe, retention of women in the field and encouraging them to stay there when it's hard, creating a more flexible approach for handling the maternity leave, because it is a biological process that happens mostly to women, right, at this point. So even though we have fathers going on paternity leaves and sharing that load, it's still pretty much a problem that goes all throughout the sector. At some point, you have to take a break in your career, and the others who get to stay in the field, which is as dynamic as tech, might get a faster start in there. And then that, I think, is combined with what Jana has mentioned, which is the lack of the flexibility when it comes to the part-time position and the inclusion of women back in the workforce after having a child, amplified by the problem of the lack of sufficient capacities for the kindergartens, for the childcare sectors, even the private ones. And that's also from a personal experience. That's something I faced, and that's something that I think is blocking so much talent from being able to be more included back in the professional workforce. And then I think when it comes to the career growth and the better opportunities, what also Jana mentioned, and I'd like to build up on that, the managerial opportunities and the topic of the glass ceiling eventually, right? That might be connected to the fact that specifically in software development and software fields, very often in order to grow and progress professionally and get a better salary, you have to take on managerial responsibilities. And that is also something that is in perception of quite difficult to do part-time or in a more flexible manner. While the more diverse opportunities for the career growth within the tech companies, like for example, an ability to focus on an expert track while still managing your life in a more diverse way, is I think something that could be helpful when it comes to bigger companies. And when it comes to the startup landscape, from my experience on the Czech tech startup scene, I would say that many young companies need to grow very fast. That's very fair. They need to deliver to their investors. And that makes them mostly focused on hiring senior software developers from the start, because that's just, you need things done yesterday, you need things done in a good way. And then perhaps the time comes when it's possible to take on some juniors and educate them further. And that's, I don't see that this is a path that many startups are pursuing on the stage, on the Czech stage right now, which I think is also something that can be changed. But also I think that creates sort of a mental barrier for women who want to choose to switch careers later on in their lives, who want to go to tech after the maternity leave, or basically try to grow in that sector, because then you have this mental barrier of maybe I won't catch up with it. They need an expert and somebody who spent their whole life doing it, and I'm just the mental blockers that maybe don't let women grow as fast as they could.
You touch on a few things here, but if I step back a little bit, because when you talk about tech, it's a big sector, you know. So we have to divide it in a little bit. So you have the VC world, you have the startup world, you have the corporation world. My feeling is that they are more the corporation world is more educated on the topic, therefore is going to be more likely to hire women than the startup world. So VC world is a little bit separated. In the US, there's a trend which is called the startup bros. Right? It's all the brothers, the bros, the male who acting like male macho guys who just building startup and they're super cool. And they're excluding women just by saying, you know, the world of the startup bros. So from your expertise and from your experience, do you see a difference depending on if it's the startup world or the corporate world in terms of adoption, in terms of hiring practice? Do the startup founders care about the topic, or they only care about their companies? A lot of questions in one topic. Maybe I will again start from the end, Magdaléna, and maybe you want to focus on the VC world, or I'll let you be wider than that.
Yeah, I think even in VC world, we can further divide, because, for example, what we invest in when we speak about tech, it's mostly solutions that are tech enabled. And we speak about like climate tech, ed tech, and others. And the representation of women is also different by sector. And I think that's supported by natural skills that women are stronger in than in other sectors. So I think we can further divide based on the sector.
Is there more hope in large companies for women then?
Well, there is definitely more hope if we take into account, for example, the regulation coming in, you know, for larger corporations above like 250 employees. There has been just recently new EU regulation accepted, benchmarking, you know, 40% of women in leadership position, and can be slightly different sector by sector, but you know, that's one of the hopes. And in geographies like ours, we definitely need this push from like the top as well. while we are developing the change in the mindset from the bottom. Yeah.
Thank you. Markéta, you've mostly been working with startups.
Yeah.
What's your view?
Yeah. Well, the one thing is that I think it's a connected. You know, when you don't have so many women studied in ICT, then you don't have so many startups, because like 80% of the startups here in the Czech Republic, they conduct business in the ICT sector. When you look at the statistics, and this is from the startup report, then about 43% of the founders, they studied ICT. So it's also connected. They do have the university degree, and they studied the technical university here in Prague or in Brno, or they studied Czech Economy University. So those are, you know, the statistics. According to startup reports, there is about 5% of women founders among the startups. According to statistics from Holkis Marketingu, it's about 9%, so there is slightly a difference. And what's also interesting, that only 1% of all the investment in the Europes goes to only women-funded startups. So there is definitely the gap, and when you compare the European Union also with the other regions or the countries such as United States or Singapore or the China, there is definitely the technology gap, which is now here in the European Union. I mean, we do focus on like the inclusion and the green topic, like the Green Deal and this topic. But what is driven, it's actually the ICT sector and the technology and the AI. Now it's more connected also to the other sectors, and this is where the companies, especially from the United States, they they are better in the results when you look to the company results. So it's not only the case in the Czech Republic, and this gap could be filled when more women could join. And I think there is the study from the McKinsey that actually to educate more girls in the tech sector, it won't help much. It would help more if the current women could, like the shift to the tech sector, or they can actually return to the tech sector, because there is like a big drop, about 18%, I think, from the university to the workforce when they studied the ICT, and the main reason it's our children, the childhood, and there is also not enough nurseries and the kindergartens where the children can be. So yeah, from one point of view, this is like a biological, as Daria mentioned, but it can be solved if we can provide more opportunities, the flexible jobs, or more daycare for the children as well.
Yeah, I also see a clear difference. I mean, in the corporations, particularly the multinationals, I think they are very far in diversity. Just Microsoft and Google are led by women in the Czech Republic. So, and that's not the last year, that's the last 10 years almost. And so there you have leadership that is well versed in those topics, that knows how to incorporate women. They have specific targets that management is assessed, among others, also based on the diversity that they manage to achieve in the teams. They also push change through the supply chain, because when they tender their suppliers, they request that certain hard targets on diversity are delivered. So I think this is driving change. When I look at the Czech IT sector, the Czech IT companies, it's really a male-dominated world. I don't know if I have ever met a woman in a leadership position in a large traditional Czech company, but I don't speak about the startups that are beyond Series A, B, or C, but really I don't want to name any companies, but the 20, 30 years old Czech companies, I think the standards are very low. In startups, I think I fully kind of subscribe to all the challenges, and I've negotiated many startup financing, and I have never seen, like a female founder negotiating a part-time with investors because she would need to care for family. But I have seen many male founders negotiating part-time, saying that they have, other priorities and important things in their life. And very often that's possible. But I think at this point I want to mention one huge role model, which is Mira Murati. That's the Chief Technology Officer of OpenAI, which is the company that has launched ChatGPT and DALL-E. And I think her story shows a few trends that I see. First, she's not the first person in the spotlight when you speak about ChatGPT. She's supporting the other founders, Sam Altman and others. Also, when she gets into spotlight, she really speaks about the societal impact of the technologies that OpenAI is putting in the world. And that's really like 60% of the interviews she gives. And when you compare it, I don't know, with Mark Zuckerberg, I don't know if he spends a lot of sleepless nights thinking about the societal impacts of social media. But for Mira, it seems really, close to her heart. And I think she's such an amazing role model that, also for the VC world, this should be put forward and made clear. And then I think also the VC world is important, because if there will be more participation of women in the VC world, that will naturally drive also change among the founders and financed companies.
There are no Czech women VCs. I mean, the CIIRC who works with you, there are very, very few Czech women VCs, right? Klara? You know that well
as well.
That's true. Yeah. They're all male.
Yeah, that's very true. I think to all that was said, I do believe, and I started my career originally in a corporation, and I could really see that corporations are much further when it comes to equality, when it comes to diversity, when it comes to taking those topics seriously. I think it's partially because the leadership is there, partially they have to, right? That those are metrics that they also report to their investors and to their board members. So I think there is a whole system behind. That's important, right? But when it comes to VC, I think there are some amazing organizations. For example, allrace.org is an absolutely fabulous one. Not that still known in Europe, but very known in the US, trying to make sure that the VC world is, has representation, not just of women, but women of color and any other genders that should be represented, right, within the VC world, which I think is a great cause. And I think when it comes to startups and talking about hiring women, to Daria's point, when you're hiring, who you're looking at, who's available on the market, you do have to make decisions, and you can either make a decision to go fast or you can make a decision to go a little slower, right? But it's always the founder's decision, right? You can choose. And I think that's super important to say, right? And if we keep just optimizing for earn and speed, right, we're never going to change anything, because change takes time. So I think that's such an important topic to think about, and trying to think about ways how you can include women at least part-time, right? Figuring out how you can make things work. I just heard a story about a couple of the largest Czech national banks with a couple thousands of employees, with hundreds and hundreds of employees on parental leave without any jobs, right? Wanting to work. 95% of them said that they want to work from paternity leave, and they're not given the opportunity, right? So I think there is still so much that we can do there. And again, to kind of going back to the individual level, we can make the decision on who we want to hire, how we build the process, right? What we optimize for. So I think that's it's kind of my experience.
Daria, do you want to add something, or?
I think that's hard after such a panel.
Sure.
No, fully agree.
So the big multinational kind of understand, and they almost have obligations to hire women. But let's talk about the startups. Let's talk about the Czech tech companies you mentioned without mentioning some names. How do you think the startups and the Czech tech companies can be more exclusive of women in the recruiting process, if it's even possible? Someone wants to throw? Yeah. Daria, do you want to start?
I could.
Yeah,
sure.
So they will have nothing to say after you.
So there is definitely a lot of opportunities to do so, but I would suggest some practical ones could be maybe rethinking the approach to formulating the job descriptions, because that's just a very special space where, specifically in the startup world, when you don't put sufficient thought into it, it's a very slippery slope to make it, pre-templated, pre-formulated, to fit, not to be as inclusive as it could be, just purely the language of it, the required qualifications of it. We know, and there's been significant research on that topic, which is that women tend to underestimate their capabilities for the job, while men tend to overestimate it. So the probabilities of women applying for a job when they don't think they're fitting 100% of the criteria is a factor which I think could be included at that stage. And then another practical suggestion, I think, to improve it on the recruitment stage, there needs to be consistent effort in improving it within the company, within the startup, within the environment of the team. And that can only be done through significant education, because there are so many angles to it. There are so many microaggressions or ways not to be inclusive without even realizing it, that I really believe that an important moment is actually opening it up on a dedicated trainings, something like that, so that people can actually understand that maybe there is something we didn't notice, as the quote went before.
Klara, you were in a position to hire in a startup. So how do you think startup can be more inclusive in that recruiting process?
Yeah, I think I absolutely agree with Daria on thinking about the process from the top line, right? What does the process look like? Having it thoroughly checked by someone else who can give you, and also it should not be the only woman that's on your team. It's not her job to fix all your mistakes, and I've known there and I've been that. There is not that many of us, and carrying our jobs and also making sure that we support all of our teams to make sure that all the materials that we put out there are inclusive. I think we can help, but I think also as a founder, as a manager, it's your job to figure out how to start being inclusive in those hiring processes. And I think when we then look at how startups hire, what that process looks like, I think it's just those basic human behaviors that need to be eliminated from that process. A lot of startups hire actually in the evening over beers. That might not be comfortable for a woman to go into a pub with 7 guys getting drunk. That's probably not on top of our list. Maybe it is, but it may not be a safe environment, right, to start with. Number 2, making sure that that you're open to feedback when she says it, right? Not being biased. And I think number 3, making sure that even if there isn't enough representation at your company yet, that you as a company are able to explain to her, we know that we don't have the right representation yet. It's important to us, and we're going to change, and this is how we're going to make the changes, right? So I think those are just a couple of basic decencies, and also basic steps that founders can do to hire more women, and also to make sure that the process is right and inclusive and just safe for women, to be fair.
Yeah. Jana, would you like to add something?
Well, I think that there are basically 2 ways for large companies that don't have full diversity to change that. either, I mean, as Barbara very nicely described it in the first panel, the management is truly convinced that this is best for the future of the company to have diverse teams. And that's, of course, the best way. But if the management has never had this type of experience and they have always operated in a kind of homogeneous environment, that will be hard to achieve. And I think the second way is that they are forced externally by external forces to do that. And what we have seen, that for example, like recently we have won a huge tender on 3 criteria. It was quality, price, and diversity. And it was the first time that actually diversity delivered a real business opportunity. And if I think about the large IT companies in the Czech Republic, like at least half of their revenue comes from public sector. So why couldn't the state say, okay, we will reward and actually choose you also based on diversity? And I think that would drive change very quickly. And as soon as you have the experience, then, you know, the second mechanism, when the management has the experience already and is actually self-motivated for diversity, starts to work on its own.
For me, it's probably hard to add anything what wasn't already said. I do agree there are like internal and external motivation. One thing maybe could be that the diversity, it's not like the case for the CSR or that it's a modern noun, but that it's actually good for the business because, you know, we all talk about if you have more women on board in a companies, then the company results are better. So there was a study and it was proof, and it was even more obvious within the tech sector, which is very interesting. So this could be like the internal, that if you want to have a better company outcomes and the result, then the diversity is the key. The external one, they can be, you know, like different from the quotas, which I'm not actually like a big fan. But maybe in the short term, it could make the change. But what do I believe it's more important are the role models and lead the good examples, and not to have, you know, some quotas and the percentage. But I can imagine that it's, you know, like easier and it can be done within the shorter time. But it definitely won't be a solution, according to my opinion. And yeah, it's the true what the Daria said. That what I wanted to actually mention, that if you have like a job description, the women, they apply only with the 100%, and for the men it's a 60%. So when you write this, you should probably look and write it a little bit differently, and more women can be encouraged to apply for the job and to try. And within the startup, yeah, it's predominant by the male, both on the side of the startup funders and both on the side of the investors. I think that there is a new initiatives from European Business Angel Network, like the manifesto, that it would like to involve more women within the tech, within the venture capital side. And this, I think it's important because those are the people who, you know, write the checks and they can make the difference. And another thing also for the accelerators, maybe, you know, to focus more on promoting those women-led companies and to lead the examples, and also to educate the community and venture capital world, maybe.
Magdaléna.
I think I would like to add that I believe in gender complementarity, and that men and women have special competencies. And what is needed is the change of mindset from competitiveness, which is mainly like male super skill, to cooperation, which is mainly like female super skill. And from that point on, once there are more women, you can start little by little. You can see the different behaviors and change in mindset happening when both genders can appreciate each other and see that more women bring more empathy or collaboration to the teams, more focus on relationships, and you can appreciate both for what they bring to the table. And I think that's the way forward, not like competing in the male way of behavior. So that's one thing. And the other one that I would like to mention, and is also supported by research, is that once women become more senior, they should support and empower more junior colleagues, which is not always what's happening and what used to happen, because there was this competitiveness embedded in us women, that once we finally managed to climb the ladder, to break the glass ceiling, we wanted them to experience the same, to fight for it. And I think we as women really need to support each other, and that has been mentioned many times. And the third thing would be support each other, because I think confidence is really more of an issue among women, and research suggests, and the imposter syndrome, and just women need to be treated slightly differently, encouraged there. We see that with our female founders, and some special programs or mentoring for them, or just internal groups within bigger corporations where women can encourage each other rather than compete. And I think that's the main change in the paradigm that needs to happen continuously, so that we can see real change.
Daria, you wanted to add something?
Yes, thanks. I wanted to fully support the point on women supporting or being competitive to each other, because despite the fact that we definitely do need role models, it doesn't unfortunately work like that. You place a woman in the team, in the leadership, and then she's automatically prone to hiring more women and being more supportive of them. It can unfortunately go both ways, where the opposite one could be, I had to put in 140% instead of 100%, so I'm going to have very high standards for those who come after me. And so that's why I think the education on the topics of diversity, of inclusion, also needs to be inclusive and not only focused on women who are there to set the path and to lead the new generation of women, but also to the male managers who need to learn to work with that too.
I was just, listening to you, I was thinking that we know that the startups, I'm going to point the finger at the startup founders now. We know the startups are the engine of growth of countries. We know that the startups are the sector which hire the most people. So how do we educate the founders, the male founders? Because I believe that the employees in large corporations are going to be educated. But how do we educate the founders? What can you do? Do you have any, do you work with any organization or, initiative that you have specifically focused on the startup founders, who are the people who are creating the jobs today? Anyone? Daria?
Good start. It wasn't specifically focused on that topic from the beginning, but I have a great experience working with the Prague Pride Business Forum on behalf of 42 Prague. Yeah. They are partners of our institution, because we also try to be as diverse as possible in terms of encouraging students from different backgrounds coming in, but also in terms of internal education of the team. And we've had some wonderful experience with them when it comes to bringing attention to the topics, again, of the inclusive language, microaggressions, and I think that could be a good first practical step to actually map the landscape, realize what's the status quo of your team, of your company, and basing on that, I guess you can choose more targeted action for the future.
Yeah, and I was also thinking, should the VC and the investors and the angels start putting pressure on the founders and make them realize you need to hire more women? Stop with the tech bros.
That's a good question.
I don't think there's. Yeah.
I actually did have a few conversations about this with a couple of VC investors, and happy to share kind of my learnings there. But I wanted to say to your previous question on what can we teach founders to, how they can kind of drive teams and, be better at working with women. And that also goes to your points on women competitiveness. I think the first thing that male founders can learn to say is, compliment women on their work well enough and not telling them, oh, you're like a dude, like you work so great. Like that's where that comes from. And that's not good. Like that's not what we need, So I think that's the first thing. And you asked on organizations that do this really well. And there is my great friend is the co-founder of FemPalette, which is an organization that provides mentoring, not just on individual level, but also on a company level. And they specialize not just in mentoring, but also in diversity and inclusion workshops. And they've been doing some amazing work helping corporations and smaller businesses to figure out how to incorporate this into their world. And on the investor side, I think this is really interesting. And the conversation we've had with the investors was not even about this. It wasn't about if VCs should hire more women. It was if the investor should punish the founder if they make a sexual harassment in their team. And that was a conversation, and it actually never led anywhere. So I think those are also against women, against anyone. I think those are like the conversations that we need to have, because that goes way beyond, and it back goes to safety, right? And if we want to make sure that there are more women in tech, the first thing that tech has to be is safe. The next thing it has to be is equal, right? People should be paid the same salary, right? We still see this. Women are paid around 80 cents on a dollar. Women of color are somewhere on 40 cents per dollar that men gets paid, right? So that's what we need to change. And then we can, then we can start having great conversations on how to, support, more women getting into it. But this is what needs to happen before, right? So that's kind of what I've seen.
I'm going to jump to the other VC.
I wanted to react on whether there should be some pressure from the top.
Something.
It's like deja vu or a no-brainer that we are even having these discussions, because that's related to sustainability, right? And sustainability as a term has been pronounced more and more in the past 3 years in the Czech Republic, as far as I've seen. And we are an impact fund. And we see that almost everyone claims that they're doing sustainable things now or impactful things. And that comes together with the regulation, again, from the European Union, And in our geographies, in the CE region, you have probably almost all of you heard the ESG terms, environmental, social governance. But the great focus really goes on environmental aspects. But social and governance can't be neglected either, because they go hand in hand. And, in the world, it's always called like the 2X, that you look at the environment and social aspects, the gender perspective. And there is more and more like pressure on reporting. It will be, legally, you will be legally obliged. And hence you will also need to, I don't want to say force, but speak with your investees about these things. And we have a case of like 4 dudes in tech sector, 4 founders. And we started to have the conversations with them. How would it look like if you introduced a woman in your team? And now, they embraced it, and they can see the value that she brings to the team, not just doing HR or anything like that, but really like being involved in the operations. And I wanted to make one last point, that I used to work in like microfinance global funds, and they are all turning into like gender lens investing right now, because the world really sees the value, and actually, women can be considered one of the biggest emerging market on a global scale. With the size twice of that of China and India combined. So that's just to like illustrate that that this is really the trend, and we are moving together with it.
It's changing for the better. Yeah. Let me turn to the audience maybe and see if they have any question, because I looked at the clock. Anyone has a question? No? Okay. I think we have until now, 5 minutes?
Cédric, maybe if I might add something. I think, to your previous questions, question that it's more on the ecosystem, like to promote it, to maybe gather the data and show you, because a lot of the founders, they are like, the engineers focus on the numbers. So maybe when we gather the data that it's actually good for the business and not for the CSR, they might say it. So this, from my point of view, it's more the role of the ecosystem. When you organize some panel discussion or you have any workshops and things like this, to think about it, to invite women. This is the great example. What it's a little bit sad for me is that in the audience there is like just
mostly women.
Few, mostly women. So this is maybe like another point, because I don't know why, but usually when you have a topic which starts like women in tech, women in startups, and when you put the word there, there are like none or very few men in the audience, and we can talk about it within our bubble, but we need to get it to other bubble which is not actually here. So this just what I wanted to add. Yeah.
Maybe as a last question, I would like to bridge with the previous panel and see how the business world can help the education world to produce more women developers and tech people and tech women for the industry. Any idea? You doing this, so maybe I'll start with you, Daria.
Thank you. Yes, indeed. I think that's what 42, the network of schools 42 is essentially doing, because the practical way to bridge that gap is to enable upskilling. At the moment when the companies on the market realize that it's a very difficult market to operate on and to hire from. So in order to create more female tech talent, you actually can't wait for the universities to produce that, and you have to start taking action. And that can be done either internally within some forms of internal academia, traineeship programs, apprenticeship programs, but that's normally quite costly, so only the bigger corporations have the advantage of doing so. Or working with an external upskilling partner, non-profits similar to Chiquita, similar to 42 Prague, which will enable women at a later stage of their life perhaps to enter the upskilling knowing that there is a safety net on the other side. A company which is actually committed to and interested in hiring them if they do everything right, follow through the curriculum and graduate. And I think from what I see in 42 Prague, and one of the reasons why I think we have one of the highest percentage of the women in our intake as compared to the other campuses the world is that we try to send out that message very explicitly. You don't need to be afraid. Of course, nobody can guarantee you anything for 100%, but here is a great palette of companies who need tech talent, who are committed to hiring diverse tech talent, and you just need to come and try, and nothing bad will happen if you fail. That goes back to what Barbara was raising within the mentality of trying and failing and trying again, which is just needed in the software development, which is often not there when it comes to the way how we raise up girls. And that's very hard to reach in the age group of, say, 30 plus, when we are in the society not really embracing the failure as much as we could. So the older we get as women, the more difficult it could be to try something new, knowing that you can fail. So normalizing the failure and letting companies help upskill the talent.
Mm-hmm. Klara?
Thank you. I think it's just absolutely amazing. There have been mentioned so many organizations, and we've talked about corporates and startups and VCs. And I think if we all just learn to collaborate with each other, right? If corporates have spent the tiniest portion of their budgets on supporting these organizations, and if VCs learn that these organizations exist, they can later recommend them to their founders to hire from, right? It's like a beautiful ecosystem that we should kind of promote a little more. That's how I think, how we could help.
Okay. Jana?
One trend that I see is that now every company believes that they are a tech company. Either they already are, or they want to be in the next 1 or 2 years. And so also the management is clearly giving more opportunities to people that are tech savvy. whether you are a medical doctor, a lawyer, teacher, like, you name it. If you are tech savvy, your career opportunities will be better. And so I was horrified when I heard in the first panel that girls would be actually today making choices not to go into technology, because not only they are foreclosing the tech careers, they are essentially foreclosing any other type of career. And so I think if the business did not make a good enough job to communicate that to the academic sector, then this has to be rectified, because there will be no non-tech jobs. And certainly they will have lower career potential. So I think there is probably a communication gap that needs to be clearly addressed.
Yeah, for me, it's probably the role models. So to go to the schools or to the community and talk about your career, your path, how it's going, and this might be like a easy win, and I think it could make a change. As I was said, you can't be what you can see. So this I do believe it might help, and I also do agree that the technology gap cannot be fulfilled, when we wait when the girls actually come out of the university. But the reskilling is the key. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't have much to add right now. Maybe just like building on the skill set, then I think it's really important like to have even the soft skills of networking and building relationships, because I think that's one of the ways how women can get to more like tech jobs, and that's the allyship that was mentioned in the very beginning. Yeah, I think that's really important. And on the other hand, women who are willing to give back, and then the compounded effort of the whole ecosystem and the stakeholders.
Thank you. Well, thank you all of you, Magdaléna, Markéta, Jana, Klara, and Daria for participating. And thank you to all of you as well, and have a great evening.